Hey guys, today we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election map based on the latest polls that have been released in the competitive races. So I will be doing this between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They are by far the most polled candidates, and on their respective party sides, they are still the frontrunners for their nominations. Joe Biden is by far the frontrunner for his renomination, and Gavin Newsom now is actually second place in the betting odds, while on the Republican side, we see that Donald Trump continues to be the leader with Ron DeSantis not too far behind. So looking at this map here, I'm going to start off by filling in the solid states that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are pretty much guaranteed to win. We do not have polls out of any of these states. That mainly is a result of the fact that these polls are just so solid that pollsters aren't really going to spend the money to try to do polls for these states for an election that's over 2 years away. So with these solid states filled in for the Democrats, I have 174 electoral votes for Joe Biden. For Donald Trump, of course, he's going to win basically all of the solid states that he won by solid margins in both 2016 and 2020. All of the South is going to go to the former president as well. I will also be including the state of Indiana. I do think Indiana will be in the solid Trump column this time around, even if he does not have Mike Pence on the ballot with him. So with the solid states filled in, 103 electoral votes for Donald Trump to 174 for the incumbent president. Alright, so starting off with the polls in the state of Arizona, this of course was a major race in 2020. This was a state that Joe Biden ended up winning. He won Arizona for a Democrat for the first time since 1996 when Bill Clinton defeated Bob Dole in the state. Since then, it has voted Republican in every single presidential election until 2020. In 2016, the margin was still 3.5% in favor of the Republicans. In 2012, Mitt Romney won the state almost by double digits. So the shift in Arizona has been very big over the last couple of years. And Joe Biden now won Arizona along with Mark Kelly, who won the second seat for the Democrats on the Senate level in Arizona. So Arizona at this point is very much a purple state, and the Democratic Party has won the last couple of major elections in the state of Arizona. And right now, according to the latest polls released from the state, it shows an even race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and a previous poll actually showed Joe Biden ahead by 7%. So obviously, Joe Biden does have the advantage here, and this most recent one is from May of 2022, and this one is from June of 2021. Now, I am not counting any of the polls sponsored by Trump's own MAGA PAC. The polls there are just simply inaccurate, and they highly skew in favor of Donald Trump every single time. So I'm only going to be using more independent and reliable polls. So in Arizona, currently, Joe Biden does have a lean advantage over Donald Trump. In the state of Colorado, this was another state that Joe Biden won in 2020 by a surprisingly large margin. I mean, in 2016, the state voted for Hillary Clinton by 4.9%. In 2020, Joe Biden won Colorado almost by a solid margin of 13.5%. If Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee for a second time, I think it would be impossible for him to win by over 15%. But according to the latest poll, he is actually only in an even race with Donald Trump, and this was released in April of this year. So the numbers in Colorado really are not looking that great for Joe Biden. I mean, if we look at the numbers for him in 2020, Joe Biden led by 12.5% in the state. So polling was not always that far off from the actual result in the last presidential election. So in the state of Colorado, I am going to give it as tilt for Joe Biden. In the end, if he were to run again, he would be almost guaranteed to win it. But the polling right now is definitely not good for the incumbent. He's only up by literally less than 1 percentage point currently. And another state that Joe Biden, of course, carried in the previous election was the state of Connecticut that he won by 20 percentage points against Trump. Hillary Clinton, in comparison, only won the state by 13.6%, but this time around, Joe Biden only has a lead of 13% against Donald Trump in a potential rematch. This poll was conducted by the A- rated Emerson College just a few months ago, so 13%, not exactly the margin that the Democrats are looking for. If you looked at the numbers in 2020, Joe Biden led by 26% and ended up winning the state just by 20%. So of course, Connecticut is going to remain in the Democratic column, but not as solid as it was 2 years ago. Now, in the state of Florida, this was one of the few states that Donald Trump actually won by a larger margin by compared to 2016. In 2016, Donald Trump won the state of Florida by 1.2%. This was still a very significant flip for the Republican Party. This was the state that got him over 300 electoral votes. However, in 2020, Donald Trump actually won the state of Florida by 3.4%, despite every single poll basically suggesting that Joe Biden was going to win towards the end. Joe Biden led in basically all of the final polls until the very last 3 polls that were released, and he led on average by 2.5% on election day. If you looked at the polls just a few months prior, at one point Joe Biden was ahead by over 7 points in the state of Florida. But of course, in the end, Donald Trump ended up winning the state by 3 times the margin that he saw in 2016, and this was a very impressive win for the Republican Party, and the Republican Party has consistently just been winning the last few major statewide elections in the state. So really, Florida is not the purple state that it once was just a decade ago. I believe that right now Florida is a lean red state just by default, and so the state of Florida currently, according to the 2024 polls, Donald Trump is of course ahead here as well. If you looked at the polls between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the most recent poll shows Trump up by a margin of 3%. We also have this poll released in September of last year showing Biden up 2%, but that was when Joe Biden's approval rating was still pretty even. So right now I'm going to give the state of Florida to Donald Trump with a lean margin according to the latest polls released. I do think that if Trump ran again, he would win Florida again. I don't think the margin would go up too much for him because of course Florida is still not a solid red state by any means, but I do think that Joe Biden would have a very hard time winning the Sunshine State even in 2024. Now, another state that I do think Joe Biden would struggle with in the next election is the state of Georgia. This was again one of Joe Biden's major flips in 2020, along with the state of Arizona. I would say these are the 2 big wins for Joe Biden in the last presidential election. Both of these states had not gone to Biden since the Clinton era, with Georgia not voting blue before 2020 since the election of 1992, in which Clinton defeated George H.W. Bush, the incumbent president, by a margin of 0.6%, similar to the 0.2% margin that Joe Biden saw here in 2020. So Donald Trump, of course, lost Georgia. This was a big blow to the Republican Party, and of course, they also lost the 2 Senate seats here, with both Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock winning their runoff elections. So in 2016, Georgia still voted for Donald Trump by 5%. In 2012, Georgia voted for Mitt Romney by 7.8%. So the state of Georgia, just like Arizona, was a very red state just a decade ago, but now the state is much more purple. But in 2024, considering Joe Biden's popularity, he really is not doing that well in the state at all. These are 2 polls, both released from this year in March and June. Both of these polls show Donald Trump ahead significantly in the state of Georgia. Now, if the election were to actually be between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and they both won their nominations, no, I do not think that there's any chance that Trump is going to win Georgia by over 10%, but I do think that right now he would win the state back. I mean, Joe Biden only won Georgia by 0.23%, and he is pretty much the most unpopular president in the last couple of decades at this point in the presidency. So I don't expect Joe Biden to hold onto a state that he only won by a margin of 0.2%. So Georgia right now would be categorized as being a likely state for the Republicans based on the polls released. In the state of Iowa, polls do suggest another very solid victory for the former president. Currently, it is going to be likely for the Republicans. In the state of Iowa, Donald Trump leads by double digits in all 3 of the polls released. One of them was even the A+ rated Seltzer & Co. that conducted this poll. The other 2 were both Republican funded, so these polls are to overestimate Trump just a little bit, but Donald Trump has been very strong in the state of Iowa. He, of course, flipped the state in 2016. It was a very impressive margin. He won the state by almost 10%. In 2012, it went for Obama by 6%. So this state shifted to the right by 16% from 2012 to 2016 after Trump won the Republican nomination. And in 2020, even though people expected Joe Biden to do better than Hillary Clinton, he still lost the state by 8.1%. So the state of Iowa with Donald Trump has really shifted significantly to the right. And in 2024, things are not expected to change. Currently, the state of Iowa is expected to go for Donald Trump by an even larger margin than the last 2 elections. Now, we also have polls out of Massachusetts. Of course, this state is going to be very solid for the Democratic Party. Joe Biden currently leads by a margin of 29% according to the latest poll. And if we look at the results in 2020, this is down from the 34% margin that Joe Biden had here just 2 years ago. So Massachusetts is obviously going to be very solid for the Democratic Party. Now, the next state that we're going to look at is one of the big ones, and that, of course, is the state of Michigan. 15 electoral votes. This state will be crucial in the next couple of presidential elections. Michigan is, of course, one of the key toss-up races in the upper Midwest, and, of course, it did previously make up the blue wall states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But in 2016, Donald Trump won the 3 blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Joe Biden narrowly won them back in 2020, and so that is why these 3 states will be crucial for future Democrats to hold on to if they want to win presidential elections. So in the state of Michigan, this state was a state that Joe Biden won by 2.8% in 2020. Right now, Donald Trump, according to the latest poll released in February of this year, Donald Trump is ahead by 2%, 40 to 38. Obviously, none of these candidates are even close to 50%, and the polls here were very wrong in 2020. I mean, the polls were significantly off. Donald Trump was down by 8% on election day, and in the end, he only ended up losing by 2.8%. The race was much closer than expected, and I mean, the polls were pretty consistent throughout the entire election cycle. Joe Biden led by around 7 to 10% throughout the entirety of the last 6 months until the election. So in the state of Michigan currently, it is going to be lean for the Republican Party, with Donald Trump up by 2% according to the latest poll. Now, a solid state for the former president is going to be the state of Missouri. The last 3 polls released here in May of this year, as well as September and April of last year, all showed Donald Trump ahead by solid margins in the state of Missouri. Missouri is another one of those states, just like Iowa and Ohio. These states used to be all toss-up races. I mean, Missouri was one of the bellwether states for a very long time, just like Ohio. If we looked at the 2004 election, it voted for Bush by 7.2%, and I mean, this was a pretty reasonable margin. Of course, Bush won the presidential election, and this was the last time Republicans had ever won the popular vote. In 2008, the state barely voted for John McCain. This ended its bellwether status. If we look at the election of 1996, Bill Clinton won the state by 6.3%. So Missouri really was a very fluid state at one point, but in 2016, Trump won Missouri by 18%, and in 2020, it was a margin of 15%. So Missouri really is not the competitive race that it once was, and so according to the polls, it will also be solid for Donald Trump once again. The state of Nevada is also going to be a really big one for the next presidential election. 6 electoral votes may not be that important, but still, if the election is very close, Nevada can make a big difference. And of course, in the state of Nevada, Joe Biden won the state by 2.4% in 2020, same margin for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And I mean, the Democratic Party has been seeing some pretty small margins in the state over the last couple of years. In 2018, of course, they won Nevada with Jackie Rosen defeating Dean Heller by 5%, and in 2016, it was a 2.4% margin for Catherine Cortez Masto over Joe Heck. So the Democratic Party, they have not been that strong in Nevada like they were a decade ago when Obama won the state by 6.7%, or in 2008 when he defeated John McCain by 12.5%. So the state of Nevada has gotten more competitive over the last decade, and so according to the latest polls for 2024, Donald Trump does lead by 3 and 10%, and this most recent poll showing Trump up 3% was conducted by the A- rated Emerson College, and the same poll showed Democrats doing better on the Senate level, with Catherine Cortez Masto ahead by 3%, and on the gubernatorial level, where Steve Sisolak also led by 3%. So Democrats on the gubernatorial and Senate levels are both doing better than Joe Biden in a hypothetical 2024 scenario, and what's even more surprising is that Ron DeSantis is actually performing better than Donald Trump in the state. Now, if we looked at the 2020 polls, we would see that Joe Biden led by 5.3%. He ended up winning by around half that margin. So the polls, they were not that terrible in Nevada. 2% is very well within the margin of error, but still, Democrats were once again overestimated. So in the state of Nevada, according to the latest polls released for Donald Trump, he currently is ahead actually by a likely margin. In the state of New Hampshire, this is going to be another very competitive race that Democrats are going to have to hold on to if they want to win the presidential election again in 2024. Joe Biden won New Hampshire by 7.4% in 2020. In 2016, it was a margin of 0.4% for Hillary Clinton. This was the second closest race of the year behind the state of Michigan. In 2016, Michigan was as competitive as New Hampshire. And so this time around, though, in 2024, Joe Biden is ahead by a likely margin once again. He is ahead by 7 points against Donald Trump in the most recent poll released just last month. The 2 previous polls released months ago showed Trump up 2 according to the Trafalgar poll, and the previous poll showed Biden up by 8%. So New Hampshire is once again going to be likely for the incumbent president, but I definitely do think the race is going to be closer than it was in 2020. In the state of North Carolina, this is another race that is not trending that well for Joe Biden right now, just like both Michigan and Georgia. But in the state of North Carolina, Joe Biden is down by 9%, according to the latest poll released just 2 months ago by East Carolina University. If we looked at the polls in 2020, Joe Biden was ahead by 1.8%. He was expected to flip this state throughout the entirety of the election cycle, and so most people expected Joe Biden to win North Carolina, but not Georgia, and so that was the big surprise of the 2020 presidential election. And so in the state of North Carolina, 16 electoral votes, it has not been won by Democrats since 2008, when Barack Obama carried it by a margin of just 0.33%. Before that, the last time North Carolina went to a Democrat before Obama, you'd have to go all the way back to the election of 1976 and the election of Jimmy Carter over Gerald Ford. So the state of North Carolina, 1.8% in 2020. Yes, the Democrats did underperform once again, according to the polls. If we look to add the final results in 2020, Trump won the state by a margin of 1.3%. So the polls did again overestimate Democrats, but still, this was also very well within the margin of error. So in 2024 right now, Democratic Party is not doing well, with Donald Trump ahead by a pretty large, almost double digits likely margin. And now we have two more states on this map with polls from so far, starting off with the state of Texas. 40 electoral votes. It'll be very important. Last time Democrats won here was all the way back in 1976, again with Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the last Democrat to truly win the South. Since then, it has voted Republican in every single presidential election. But in 2020, Trump won Texas by 5.6%. 2016, it was 9%. 2012, it was 16% for Mitt Romney, even though he lost to Barack Obama, winning only 206 electoral votes. So the state of Texas is not the state that it once was. The state is trending to the left, and Donald Trump has not helped with that. Donald Trump has performed pretty poorly in Texas in the last two presidential elections, and his margins have been getting worse and worse. But in 2024, Trump only leads by 6%. This is a pretty disappointing margin for the Republicans, considering how unpopular Joe Biden is. And this poll was released in June of 2022, so just 1 month ago. Donald Trump only leads over Joe Biden by 6%. So Texas is going to be likely for the Republicans. Without a doubt, they're going to win it in 2024, but still not exactly a margin that they should be happy about. In the state of Wisconsin, it is actually going to be lean for the Democrats, surprisingly, with Joe Biden leading by a margin of 4%, according to the latest poll released in October of last year. So yes, this was when Joe Biden was more popular, and in 2020, Joe Biden won the state of Wisconsin by just 0.63%. In 2016, Trump actually won the state by a larger margin than Biden. So I do think Wisconsin is going to be a state that will be very difficult for Biden to hold no matter who he faces in 2024. Even if he was popular, he only won by 0.63%. This state really could go both ways, and with Joe Biden being very unpopular right now, I would expect Republicans to win Wisconsin, but we're just going to have to see if more polls come out for 2024 in the state. I'm sure they will, but the candidate that the Republicans choose will also have a major impact on their race. So Wisconsin right now, according to the latest polls, is going to be lean for the Democratic Party. And so now we do have 80 electoral votes worth of states in which we do not have polling from, and so I'm going to fill in these states just based on how they are very likely to vote. So New Mexico is going to be likely for the Democrats. I have Minnesota as being lean, Virginia as being likely. I think Biden's going to win it by over 5% once again. He, of course, did win it by 10% in 2020. The at-large vote in Maine is also going to go for the Democrats, but those are really the only states I can give to Joe Biden right now. I do think Trump obviously is going to win the second districts of Nebraska and Maine, both by likely margins, as well as Ohio, South Carolina, and Alaska. He won all of these states by likely margins in 2020, with the exception of the second district of Nebraska that actually voted for Joe Biden. But with redistricting, the region will favor the Republicans a little bit more, and so I do think Trump would be able to flip it back. And I will give Donald Trump right now the state of Pennsylvania. Joe Biden barely won it in 2020, and considering his popularity right now, I would expect Donald Trump to carry it by a very slight margin, just like he did in 2016. And so right now, this is the 2024 presidential election map based on the polls. Obviously, this is not going to be that accurate. Donald Trump is not going to win Georgia or Nevada by likely margins, but as of right now, this is what the map looks like based on the polling data. And I do think that it's interesting to look at the state of the 2024 presidential election as of right now between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Obviously, if they win their nominations, the race is going to close up in a lot of these states. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I still have COVID-19, so that's why my voice probably sounds terrible. And so yeah, please consider subscribing, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video.